Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books. At Red Penguin Books, we work with authors of all types and genres. So whether you have a manuscript all ready to be published, maybe 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer, or just an idea in your head, visit redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'd also like to mention thebookfairies.org. The Book Fairies collect and distribute over 50,000 books every single month to those in need. So if you have some spare books lying around, or time, or a donation, please visit thebookfairies.org. Now on with our show. Welcome, and I am so delighted to be joined today by Aleisha Brooks. Aleisha is, you're going to love her. She's got such an interesting job besides all of her writing, which before the show we were chit-chatting about, but her book, Reunion, I think is in one sense, every single person's fantasy as to what's going to happen if you did not necessarily grow up and be that popular person back in school. I think Reunion is what you're hoping your future has in mind. So please welcome Aleisha Brooks. Aleisha, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
And yes, I think do your readers do say about Reunion? Yes, that's what I want to happen.
Oh yes, I had comments like off the chart,
And you work in the film industry in your life as well. So I would think that you have a lot of people in your world that were kind of, hopeless in high school and got to go back as that person. Is that, was this kind of based in some fact, or was it actually your own life?
No, not my own life, but
I mean, we're supposed to write what we know, so.
Well, no, I feel so inspired by things that I see and people that I meet, and one of the things that I feel like happened to me is just I get inspiration in a flash, very fast, and it could be through anything, through reading the newspaper, or traveling, which I love to do. Taking walks often gives me a lot of inspiration. Being around people gives me inspiration. So what ends up happening is I just get this story in my head, and the moment I'm inspired, I start to write it down. And I felt like this was more along the lines of a tribute to people who've overcome alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Because there's, there's the vein, the underlying story of defeating alcoholism in it. And there's also more tributes to people who have experienced cancer. As you know, we have a cancer story in it, but the reunion aspect is what brings it all together, because it's truly, the idea is about reuniting family. And the interesting thing for me is I grew up in a big family, lots of brothers, one sister, but 5 brothers, and we all are very, very close. We were so close, and still are so close, that it's hard to be away. Like, some of my family have now moved to Texas and Florida, and it's almost like unheard of. Oh, the Brooks family is not together. It's weird, So the reuniting family aspect is really strong with us, because I've had friends growing up and saying, wow, I'm not really in touch with my brother, or I don't talk to my parents, or this or that. And that, I think, got stuck in my head. And when I have something stuck in my head, I think I need to work this out. And I want to build a solution to it. And so for me, it came in this form of this romance, where I'm not just having a reunion for, their high school, but also reuniting this family and bringing them back together.
Right. Oh my gosh. You said some huge gems right there that I think there's a lot of writers who are, I hope they heard them, so I'm going to say them again. The first thing that you said that I was so inspired by was that you are often inspired in a flash,
Yeah.
just an instant, that it could be something you see or hear. And what I so loved about the way you verbalize that, and you're obviously, you know, a successful writer and professional, is that so many people think that that things have to germinate over, you know, months and years, and that it's this huge thought that they're looking for. People that are stuck with writer's block, and when you describe that, it could be just a glance or something that you see it, and that you immediately act on it, whether you write it down. I mean, heck, we're all walking around with these things in our hands. We can write it down immediately, record it, something. So I so appreciate that you kind of took it from that level of, hey guys, just open your eyes.
Yeah.
Open your eyes, because sometimes people think that they're waiting for some huge, I don't know if they think that there are, you know, novels up in the clouds and they're waiting for one to just burst in a rain cloud over their head. So
Right. The whole thing all at once, you know, it doesn't happen that way.
oh no, I'm so glad you said that, because I think people are thinking that that's the way it's supposed to be, and for you to say no, it was a flash. It was, I get inspired and I see things and I write them down, and wow, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That
Of course.
was huge. But the other thing that I absolutely loved is, okay, we're sitting here, and obviously, you know, any of our viewers are sitting here looking at this hot cover, okay? and what you're describing, though, and especially some of the things that you wanted to include, you know, I jokingly said to you, you know, we're supposed to write what we know, and someone is looking at this saying, well, she's got a better life than I do, man. She's writing what she knows. But then you went on to discuss your family and how close you are, and you wanted to, and how you feel when you hear other people who are estranged from, or perhaps, you know, have no relationship with their families. And someone else is saying, yeah, I know all that stuff too. You know, and yes, it could all be rolled into a hot novel, folks. You know, that's
Exactly.
what I'm loving. What you said was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that basically the purpose behind the novel is just that, is when you're writing, you're looking to have a message, you know, and if that message is going to come in the form of a science fiction novel or a historical romance, or, you know, a contemporary romance or a comedy, you know, the message is there. And that's basically my message, is of hope, you know, and I, you know, you'll get that reference, of course, you know it by the end of the novel, is you have that reference and that inspiration and that hope. And so, yeah, that's what I do when I journey through my writing, is I'm looking for that message.
Thank you. What a message for our writers out there, and for our readers. You know, when you're reading, you want things that have layers too, and that's something that I so appreciate about you as a writer. There's a lot of hot, you know, bare-chested books out there, folks, but not all of them have a message or multiple storylines or layers like Aleisha's book here. So if you're looking for, you know, let's rip his clothes off, you got it.
For that cover again, I'm going to tell you something interesting about
Oh, okay. Let me get the cover up here. Don't tell me that's like your husband, because we're all going to be jealous.
No, these are two models, and they're married. So
Really?
yeah, they are married. I met them while searching for actors for a film of mine, and it turned out they were free during this time period that I wanted to take the shots. And I said, oh my God, let's do this, you know? So we actually shot this photo shoot in my backyard. I had the photographer lay up, you know, black tarp and the lighting and everything. And it was so perfect. I mean, you can see, we had so many beautiful shots, but they have so much beautiful chemistry. They're both models and they're married.
Oh my gosh! See that now you're plugging marriage, man. Because most people don't get married people could look like that.
You can still find love.
You can find love, folks. It is out there. Even this, shirt ripping passion love. That is a gorgeous cover. Absolutely gorgeous cover. Obviously, you have an eye, and you're in the film industry. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's so interesting, and how you're approaching writing novels in a little bit of a different way than many other people because of it.
Yeah, actually, what's so interesting about that, I'm glad you brought it up. My very first novel was an adventure romance called Isabella's Letters. And I started writing that. It's a period piece. I started writing that and I got blocked. I was about 17, 18 years old. And so I wrote to my great uncle, who's actually passed away, but he was a sci-fi novelist. And I wrote to him and sent the synopsis and my problems and the letter about like what was going on. And one of the first things he said, here I am, 17 years old, you can't kill off a main character. Like, you can't? Okay. So that was part of my lessons learned, was some of these things by this exceptional novelist. And so I kept working on it, but I put it away for a while, as we do, as we novelists and filmmakers do. I put it away for a while. I ended up getting married and having a baby very early, very young. And then what happened was I made my discovery of what I really wanted to do in my life through starting back in theater. And I started to write plays for this theater in San Diego. And after I did that, the San Diego Film Festival came to town. And I said, wow, that sounds right down my alley, So I went to the San Diego Film Festival and I was listening to all these panels, and it just struck me. It was like, wow, this is my calling. This is where I'm supposed to be. So, I took that first novel out. I think I was 50 pages in when I got stuck. I took that novel out and I turned it into a screenplay, and it just came. It just came like this. And then I was able to reverse engineer it back into the novel. And so basically I have the novel and the screenplay, and that's how I did it. And from then on, I wrote so many different screenplays, but then I got inspirations for novels. And so what I would start doing is take them and make them into screenplays as well, so that I have the best of both worlds.
Oh my goodness, what a journey. And I have a huge question for you, because as you're speaking, I realize that so often people will come to me and ask me, they'll say, I've written a screenplay, should I make it a novel, or should I write a screenplay or a novel? I get that question an awful lot. And I will admit to you, because we're here and you're in film, that very often I will say to people, if you're not sure what you're writing and you have no connections at the moment, write a novel, just because people can read a novel. But if you write a screenplay, I mean, I don't have a movie director in my back pocket here that we can do something with. But could you talk to me and to our viewers a little bit about the different approaches, and what might make that deciding factor if someone is unsure?
Sure. So basically, with a novel, you can go and delve in so much more than a screenplay. Remember, in a screenplay, you're dealing with 100 to 120 pages tops. With a novel, this is where you really pour your heart into all the characters. It's really where you're creating your worlds, where you're really putting heavily on the message. And I feel like with a screenplay, you have to condense that into 90 minutes.
Okay.
And so it's very difficult to take, because actually there's a whole method, and I think, Bill, you know this because you have ventured into this realm as well. is that there's a whole method about moving a book into adapting it into a screenplay, you know?
Yeah, the likelihood of getting a screenplay made into a movie is far, far smaller than the likelihood of getting a book published.
Right.
And furthermore, a book can then, if it's successful, or even if it's not successful, but gets good notices, can then be made into a screenplay. But just to start willy-nilly to write a screenplay, there's nothing wrong with the exercise, but the odds are very much getting the deal. It took me 9 months, and this is my third book, 9 months to get the deal with a publishing house for my book. Imagine if I had just written a screenplay. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right there. Plus, it's a different craft.
It's a different craft, totally different formatting.
It's really quite a different craft.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that, because when someone comes to me and asks, should I be writing a novel or a screenplay, I am under the presumption that they are new to the craft of both, or else they wouldn't have asked me the question.
That's right.
If they were that experienced with either craft, they wouldn't be asking the question. So if they're new to the craft, Bill, you're absolutely right. They can get their foot in the game. The chances are better with a book than with the screenplay, as far as right.
I'd even suggest stepping back. You know, if you're brand new and you've never written anything before, write some short stories. I mean, nowadays you can actually put a novella on Amazon. People will buy a novella.
Absolutely.
Why jump into writing a whole novel if you're not ready? I mean, I've joined writers groups, and you know, someone will show how inexperienced they are by saying, hey, I want to write something. What should I write about? Like, no, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You start with an idea. You don't start with, oh, I want to write something and you give me the ideas. No, because even us writers, like we writers, I get people shoving ideas in my face all the time. Oh, Aleisha, you should write about this. You should. I'm like, no, that's okay. I have a ton of ideas in my head. I can barely get them out. It's too much.
You know, one of the things that I always say to people, someone will say, I want to be a writer. Well, I say, then write. Yeah. Because unlike, say, I want to be a tennis player, I want to be a talk show host, I want to be this, that, or the other thing. It's a very simple process to sit down and write. It doesn't require anything other than you and something to write with. Right. Everything else is more complicated than that. So I always encourage people just to write. If they really say, I've had that question, and there's someone, a beginner's question, I want to be a writer, then I'll say, well, you know, then write something. And to add a coda to what you were talking about with the screenplay, you could also write a simpler version of you could write an audio play that could also be far greater likelihood that would be produced in some form with 3 or 4 actors whom you could pay a minimal amount to play various characters on it, and you could create a little radio show. Those 10, 15 years ago, there was very little market for those, but there's much more of a market now.
You're absolutely. You know, it's so funny that you mentioned that, Bill, because one of the synopses that I had written for one of my screenplays, it's called The One That Got Away, I decided to do an audio synopsis. And so I got all these actors together, we went into a studio and we actually recorded, you know, like 3 minutes of these different parts, you know, and with a narrator and everything. And it turned out to be really great. So I love that idea. That's good.
I think that's
I listen to a lot of audiobooks, actually. What happened was that 10 years ago, I don't know, 8 years ago, whenever, I had to have a double hip replacement because I really had a problem walking. I thought, this is going to be a nightmare trying to sleep. And my son said to me, why don't you try audio books? So for the last 8 years, during the night, when I wake up and I want to go to the bathroom and come back, say 3 in the morning, I put a book in. And usually I listen to them 2 or 3 times because the amount of retention on an audio book is not the same as the visual process of reading a book, you know, when you're just hearing it like that. You don't get as much out of it. But there's a whole market out there. There's brilliant people recording. My current book has been made into an audiobook to which I contributed, but I'm not the main narrator, because I thought it'd be better to get somebody who does this for a living as a narrator of books rather than do it myself. However, on my next book, I'm going to do it myself because I'm writing a sequel to my current novel, which I know we'll talk about. And every 6 or 7 days, I read what I've done to my beloved Jane, who's sitting over there reading the New York Times now. And she says, it's so funny when you read it. So I'm going to read the next book myself.
Well, I certainly understand the love of having, professional actors, and what Aleisha described with getting a bunch of actors. I mean, that's the ideal, if you can have multiple actors for multiple voices. But when you don't need multiple voices, Bill, readers do love to hear from the author. They really
Yeah, well, I'm in the book because, well, first let me show you the book so you know what you're talking about.
Oh, well,
My
I'm
book
pull it up here. I'm gonna
Oh,
pull
okay, fine.
So that
I'm in the audio version. Yes,
ah,
there's the book, The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog, as told to Bill Boggs, because that's the actual title, as told to Bill Boggs, because the premise of the story is, and it's of all the interviews I've done, Aleisha have done about 50 interviews in the 50s for this book. Very little has been about process. And I love, as a talk show host, which I've been all my life, I love to talk to artists, writers about process. So my book essentially germinated in the following way. It's the second novel I've written. The first novel I wrote was a comedic love story. It was published by Grosset and Dunlap and did pretty well. And that was a long time ago. But it turned out the literary gods, Renee Zellweger, actually optioned the novel several years ago. Nothing happened, but that got made. Then I wrote a self-help book. But what happened was this. The last TV show I was working on went off the air. And I said, I'm in my 70s now. I've been chasing jobs on television my entire life. I'm going to focus on writing. So I made a mental commitment that I was going to focus on writing. And I don't know where I got the premise, but the premise came into my mind. And this is the premise of the book. Back in North Carolina, where the book begins, where I had a television show, I had a dog who was on the show who was very popular, an English Bull Terrier named Spike the Wonder Dog. One of those dogs, like the Target dog with the black thing on his eye. Anyway, the dog was on the show and he was a riot. He got more fan mail than I did. Shortly before leaving High Point, North Carolina after 3 years and going to New York, Spike the Wonder Dog was killed by a drunk driver. It was a horrible thing. The premise that I had was this, and I don't remember when I got it. What if Spike hadn't gotten killed and he had come with me to New York and became a big star? So I sat down, and two things happened within the first, in terms of process, the first 10 minutes, immediately. First, instantly, I wrote it. It's narrated by the dog. The other book was also in the first person. Instantly, the voice of the dog, the voice of my central character, came through me. And it was a voice, a rhythm, a comedic viewpoint. And I've done a lot of comedy in my life. I started my career in comedy that I had never spoken in, certainly never written in, and never performed in. And that was really special. And then I started to write it as if it were 1975 when I first came to New York. And I immediately realized, let go of that preconception, right? Don't hold on to that preconception. There's so much more to satirize now than going back to 1975. What do you have then? Big hair, horrible men's clothing, and discos. But now we got a lot of stuff. So that was essentially how it began. My intention with the book was to write a funny book, a comedy, something that would make you laugh out loud. I wrote down before, what's the message? The message in my book, it's a love story between Bud, the talk show host, and Spike, the dog. But I think the message is, let's laugh at ourselves. I actually put on the cover of the book there's a little warning. It says politically incorrect humor. Now, I don't mean that. See? I don't mean that in terms of Republicans and Democrats. I mean that in terms of artistic license to express yourself as a writer. I have a lot of friends in comedy. I began my career in comedy. And the boundaries on comedy are pushing in. And so my book is, in a sense, politically incorrect in the way that it's not really too worried about offending people. It's not intentionally trying to offend people. It's not being mean. As a couple of reviews said, it doesn't mean to be mean. It's just wonderfully politically incorrect. That's a line from one of the reviews. So that was my objective, to see if I could write a funny book, since I began in the world of comedy and comedy writing. And I'm at work on The Return of Spike right now.
All right, The Return of Spike. I love that. And Aleisha, what is next on your docket?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm working on. So one thing is my co-writing partner, who lives in South Africa, he and I just finished our second draft of an animated film. That was
great. Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, first attempt at an animated film. So this is really fun. And then the next thing I want to do, you know, and I've been brainstorming and writing the bones of it, but work on the next part for a reunion, because I am turning it into a series.
Oh, wonderful. Now, please speak to me about how you knew that it should be a series. And I'm going to ask Bill the same question, because Bill is up to Spike Part 2. So, you know, is there that moment that you say, I can't let go, kind of like when I'm binging Netflix and I hope there's another one? I mean, what is that moment like, and how do you know?
Well, when you feel like you've developed a world that people want to hear more about, you know, like my second novel was also narrated, by the way, narrated by one of the characters, a snarky 7-year-old kid who's a genius, and she calls her parents by their first names. And, you know, so that one, for an example, you know, when you have not just your fans saying, we want to know more about this world and this person, and, you know, but you yourself want to know more about it, you know? So with Reunion, it only makes sense that part of the other side of the family, I need to go into their worlds now, because she was reintroduced to a sister she never knew she had. So now my focus is going to be on introducing that sister and talking about her life. So that's going to be the next one.
Well, while I was writing The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog, as told to Bill Boggs, because again, the dog narrates the story to me. I appear in the book actually as myself a little bit, because the dog has told me the story and I have to explain things. But as I was writing it, I was so enjoying the process and really felt that I had something quite original, that I planted things in the book that will ultimately be resolved in the second book. In the second book, which I don't know whether the working title is Spike Unleashed, then the Wonder Dog Returns. But I also had the idea of just, he's back, something like that. But the second book that I'm working on now is Aleisha and Stephanie, is going much more difficult for me than the first book. The first book followed the arc of my career as a talk show host. Starts in North Carolina, comes up to New York, unhappy with what's big success in New York, but unhappy with what's going on. And then the last third of the book is complete fiction about something that happens to Spike. He's kidnapped. At the beginning of the book, you know that the dog is in jeopardy. He thinks he's going to die the next day, and he starts telling the story from that point. So the process of doing it, the second one, is more difficult because it doesn't follow the arc of my career. There's a lot in The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog that absolutely happened on television. A few of my friends say it's a memoir. It is not a memoir of my life narrated by a dog. There are those who think that, but the second book is completely made up story. Completely. Still has elements of truth, because Spike and his master are in on television or in the media, then there's still a lot to satirize about the media. But it starts out post-pandemic. So I've been able to work in some post-pandemic humor. Like, for example, one of the characters in the book, the mayor of the city, has developed something called machine gun elbow, which is described by the AMA as a tapping of pain at the end of the elbow, which comes from excessive bumping of elbows with people to say hello. And yeah, machine gun elbow, one example of post-pandemic humor.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that there's a post-pandemic. So,
well, in my mind, there's a post-pandemic, at least. In my computer, there's a post-pandemic, but heavens to be, not right now. But I couldn't, from a standpoint of process, Aleisha, I ended the book right before the book came out in May, at the beginning of the pandemic. So at the time the book came out, the very last thing I added, the night before, the book had been written and I edited it 3 times. I went through it 3 times, tightening and punching it up. The last thing I added, the night before I turned in the full manuscript, was the words virus free before gingerbread houses from China. I added the word virus free.
Yeah.
So as I started writing the book, I thought, when is the book? Originally, it was just going to kind of pick up where the other book ended. But that, to ignore the pandemic and all the humor that could come, and the reality of the pandemic, I couldn't do. I started out thinking about it. And I said, when is the book? The book is now set right after the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So there were still people who were worried about masks, some of them wearing mini masks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, mini masks. I know.
It's not even correct. That just boggles my mind. That's my other half of my job, right, Stephanie?
Yes, that's the other half of her job. I was going to ask you, what's your title? CO?
It's a COVID-19 compliance officer.
Okay.
So CCO for short.
Are we 6 feet apart and appropriate here on the show?
I think we're all appropriate,
When you told me that, I felt
we need more of that. I'll tell you, I'm here in Palm Beach, Florida, and Florida is very lax. I mean, my doctor has said to me, do not dine in a restaurant. It's way too risky. Everyone's got their masks off. If one person in the restaurant is contagious, then it's possible you can get it. So, well, I see people in restaurants all the time like it's the good old days, if they were really that good, but I guess they were compared to now.
And meanwhile, Aleisha's on the film set. I can't even imagine trying to do this because
fabulous. That's a great job.
It's exceptional. I love it. Every day I get to go to work. I'm so blessed,
But I'm sure on a film set, they're so wrapped up in what they're doing that they don't even think twice about like walking over here and, because they're worried about lighting and what are my lines. And I can only imagine what you see in a day.
Oh, I'm like the air traffic controller. Seriously. I'm just like, I'm at Grand Central Station every day. Honestly, that's the way that it is. It's like, in a regular film set pre-pandemic, it's like a swarm of cicada coming in on the set, like building, and I can't have that. Basically, there are guidelines, and so I go through and I'm circulating around the set and I'm making sure, number one, everybody's wearing the mask properly, over the nose, under the chin, not down here, not up here, not under here, just wearing it properly and not wearing a mask that they've been wearing for the last 3 days, I mean, it's every day they're changing their mask and that they're 6 feet apart. This happens quite a bit. I remember I was on a commercial set and it's, I think on a large commercial set, you have a lot more opportunity to keep people apart, to keep them in their pod areas, in their zones. Art departments over here, the director is over here, and you know, it's a lot easier. But when you're dealing with on location, or you're dealing with stages where everything's much smaller, the way that we've compensated is having a smaller crew, and then using policies like step in, step out, you know, putting the crew on rotation, where they're like, the art department is setting up now, so nobody else is inside the room where the art department is setting up. And then of course, you know, as much as possible, keep people apart. And then the actors, they're the ones who are at most risk. So they are completely masked and having a face shield up until the moment they shoot, which means even, you know, rehearsal and blocking, it's all done with masks.
Wow. All of this so that we can keep making movies.
That's right.
You know?
Well, you know, I think about it every day and I'm like, okay, we are definitely essential. I mean, I look at all the what's considered essential. And if you look back in history, what was bringing people out of the idea of war? I mean, because war really tends to introvert people and make them feel bad and depressed. And so we had these wars, we had the Depression, we had all these things. And it was movies and art. And this is the thing that was so uplifting for the population. And so that is why it's essential, because aesthetics is on a whole new level, you know, as far as spiritual wise, you know, aesthetics is like way up there in this level that uplifts people, brings people happiness, you know, when times of, look, pandemic, you know.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for what you're doing, you know, and it's a job that most of us don't think about when we're thinking about what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
I love your description of you as an air traffic controller. What a visual I have of that. What an absolute visual I have of you. No, you step back. Step back.
Yes.
You walk past. You could walk past. Oh,
yes, exactly.
Crazy stuff. So you've mentioned, Aleisha, that you're going to have reunion 2.
Mm-hmm.
Will you also be doing post-pandemic, mid-pandemic? How does the pandemic feature into your books here?
Yeah, this we've talked about it in our writers groups, things like that. I choose not to put the pandemic into my book. One, because this book came out in actually 2019, so just last year. And so I feel like with her sister that I'm going to be explaining, it's going to be more in the past anyway.
Gotcha.
I have to bring her up and how she grew up and create that world. And so that's already way pre-pandemic anyway.
Right.
The other thing that we've discussed in our writers group, see, I think for Bill, I love the concept and it works out very well with comedy, but in our writers group, people are, you know, writing sci-fi and they're writing all sorts of different types of novels. And for me, what I'm trying to express, I want to move people out of the current situation and let them play in a totally different universe. And so that's been my guidelines all along for myself, is to like put people in a totally different universe. And I think if I have an inspiration for something we can do with masks, I'm not going to ignore it, but it's just not like in my wheelhouse right now.
Well, I'm so glad, you know, for both of you addressing the issue, whether or not you are going to address it in the book, or if you're choosing to keep that surreal, let's live in a different world kind of a thing. Because again, our writers out there are facing this right now. How do you deal with such a momentous occasion? Do you face it? Do you deal with it? Do you, as Bill put it, deal with the aftermath and envision, because you are a fiction writer here, post-pandemic, which I love that phrase, and the mini masks, and I could totally picture this. I'm totally about it. Or like Aleisha, since the book is written to remove a person from their current circumstances and put them in another world, well, then addressing it brings us right back. And for all those readers who, this is a terrible time. You don't want to be reading about, there's both sides. There's both ways of approaching it.
In the next couple of years, you're going to see everything. You're going to see books that are written during the pandemic, post-pandemic, and mine is just post-pandemic. Like people are just starting to come back. All manner of locations, and readers will accept whatever it is based on the reality of that book, I think.
Bill, it sounds like in Palm Beach they're already thinking pandemic, huh?
It sounds like in Palm Beach. What was that, Stephanie?
In Palm Beach, it sounds like they already think it's post-pandemic.
Well, there are, there's a certain, I would say that the single most disappointing thing for me that has happened during this terrible year is the fact that the nation became divided on public health issues. So, there were people in Delray Beach 6 months ago had a mask burning ceremony. I don't get it. I don't understand just simply not accepting scientific facts. Right. But the exact opposite of what I thought was going to happen. I thought the pandemic would come in and we were going to unite like it was World War II, the country that won World War II, but no. So that's been extremely disappointing to me. And I would predict, and it's not a happy prediction, the worst is yet to come without question. If you look at the exponential mathematics of it, you have to get 70% of the population inoculated in order for us to have herd immunity. And with all the Christmas travel, I think there's going to be a dreadful spike. But right here in Palm Beach, there are people who are compliant, and there are people who are just like interested. Yeah, the governor hasn't imposed the kind of, as you know, it's up to various governors and states, hasn't really imposed, given the kind of leadership that would support science. That's it. And that is a non-political statement. It's a simple statement of scientific. If you believe in science is going to create a vaccine, you also have to believe in the science that is telling you what to do to avoid getting sick. It's not like two different kinds of science. No. I have spoken.
Well, Bill, I'll tell you one thing from my viewpoint as a COVID compliance officer, and this is something that I share often with my film sets, and that is, when you're home or when you're with your loved one whom you live with, it's whatever you two have, whatever agreement you have, in the home, you're going to be together, and that's how you are, and you can be unmasked and be like that and go out and, walk and get your vitamin D and drink your water and do everything. But when you're in a group, it's different. Of course. Because that group is now your community. And I tell people on my film set, I said, I don't care, if you're at home and you're not wearing your mask, but when you're in a group, you take responsibility for that group. Right.
It's common sense. It's really not a debatable point, it's common. But one of the things when I mentioned I just thought about this early on in writing the book. So I made it that during the pandemic, Spike, the dog, had a promotional campaign on television, a mask-wearing campaign. It became very popular, and then a local firm started making Spike masks in different designs with Spike's face on them, and every kid in North Carolina wanted to get Spike masks, right? And so there's one set of parents who are against. I can't explain it, the story, but one thing leads to another, and there's a complaint from some parents that because of the Spike masks and the children demanding to wear the Spike masks all the time, the children have developed wombat ears, which that the parents are protesting that, and there may be a lawsuit from the anti-mask people about wombat ear. That's one example of how you can work something through there.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's a funny term, isn't it? Wombat ear? Something about it. I like rolls off my.
I do chafe behind there, so I know what you mean.
I know.
We should like have some kind of
Yes.
cream for behind your ears now,
Some, and also I wear hearing aids, and when you take the thing off, every once in a while the hearing aid is dangling.
Right.
And my beloved Jane lost a diamond. What was it? Stud?
Gosh.
Diamond stud that came flying out,
Oh.
and I walked around looking on the sidewalk, couldn't find it, back to the place where we were. But you can imagine what that's. But that is not a complaint. It's just an observation. Things happen.
It just is what it is.
That's it. I'm glad you said it is what it is, because this is a term that has become so much in vogue. I have decided personally, as a New Year's resolution, to try not to say it is what it is. In a long conversation with a friend of mine who's a linguist, we tried to come up with something that is comparable to it is what it is. And it is, well, we must accept that. Because that's what you're saying. It is what it is means, well, we must accept that. Whereas Seinfeld, if you watch the current Seinfeld thing on Netflix, he's great on language. And he does a whole thing about sentences that that repeat the word in it, make everything seem more important. Like it is what it is, makes it seem more essential. But anyway, I don't mean to put you down there, Stephanie, but this is just an example. Like the language changes and language evolves. Like a term I personally try not to use, but I would put it in another character in the book would be, I'm not a chocolate person. I'm not a cruise person. Instead of saying, I don't really like chocolate very much, or no, I don't enjoy, I'm not a cruise person. Where did this come from? But it's now it's a part of our language. But it is what it is, I think, it is what it is what it is. It's just good, you got that. We'll see what happens. But that's one of my several New Year's resolutions.
Nice.
Well, I'm glad a new book is one of your New Year's resolutions also, as well as Aleisha. Any other writing projects that are coming in the new year?
No, I just personally, I'm continuing to promote The Adventures of Spike, the one that August told to Bill Boggs. It came out in the middle of May, which was a terrible time for a book to come out, and books never got to the New York Times or USA Today, and it was really upset about that. But we've gotten very good reviews, and I'm writing. I'm writing an outline for a documentary that may be about the era when local and regional talk shows. Like I had a show for 12 years out of New York that was a region of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, that predated that predated national daytime talk shows for the most part. And it's going to be about how long-form conversations, like for example, can you imagine a daytime show today where you would have two people this is a show, you can see it on my YouTube channel, Gore Vidal and Roy Cohen talking to each other for 1 hour on daytime TV, or an interview with Sammy Davis for 90 minutes. But there was a period of time that that disappeared, like by 88, 89. There was a period of time when regional and local television shows had major celebrities stopping by and major conversations. So I'm writing an outline for a documentary. Somebody's interested in doing one featuring some of the shows from my archive. But beyond that outline, I'm just working on the book.
Okay.
I'm working on the book.
Aleisha's got that animated film coming out. Very exciting. And part 2 of Reunion is coming out.
Yeah.
2021 will be a busy year for you both. Let me just remind our viewers of your books so that they can get reading before there are a lot more. So you better get started because there are sequels on the way. Aleisha Brooks' Reunion is out now. You can get it where books are sold, but also at AleishaBrooks.com. And you might want to head over to her website anyway to keep up on all of her books and all of her activities. And then also Bill Boggs, The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog, as told to Bill Boggs. And please visit him at billboggs.com, or you can just simply go to orderspike.com to buy the book immediately. And both of these books will have a second coming out in the new year at some point,
Yeah.
Along with all sorts of other projects. So we want to keep up with you. Please, both of you, I would love to have you back on anytime you've got a new release book coming out. So
thank you, Stephanie. This has been, Aleisha, an honor to be on with you, Aleisha. It's been a real pleasure, a real pleasure discussing this. Thank you.
Likewise, both of you. And just, Stephanie, I did want to make a note, since you do have authors on this.
yes.
I have an 18 video free series for authors on conquering writer's block. So
really? Would they find that at AleishaBrooks.com?
they should be able to, but I'm also on YouTube, so I'll make sure there is a link to it on my website. And yeah, if they have any issues with writer's block, there's already 18 free videos right there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me mention something. My YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel that's been going for 10 years called Bill Boggs TV on YouTube. And there's about 400 videos there. Many with great writers, but personalities, performers, artists of all kinds, debates, and a lot of things, a few things about my book. But I like to say this, I often wonder where the archive of the tapes that I had saved from various shows would end up. And it's on YouTube, and it's of course free. Bill Boggs TV on YouTube. I work on it almost every month to put more up there.
Fantastic.
That's awesome, Bill.
Both of those links and videos and everything get shared with our own lists and our viewers. You two have been amazing. I hope that you are going to come back with your next book, because you're such fun guests.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
And
health.
thank you,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year and happy writing and reading to all of our viewers.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit BetweenTheCoversTV.com. By the way, at BetweenTheCoversTV.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.